Hello, welcome to the Bluegrass Blues podcast. I'm Amy.
And I'm Jesse. Well, we got a lot to talk about this week. We have this big, beautiful batch of bullshit bill that's going around, and we also have a bunch of, billionaires talking, actually yelling at each other. So before we get into that part of it, Amy, what's in this bill? Because I know that a lot of our listeners probably don't know what's going on with it, but it's worth knowing what's in it before we can criticize it.
Well, by and large, this big bullshit bill is about concentrating wealth, with billionaires and hurting the rest of us, particularly those of us who have health care with Medicaid and are on food stamps with SNAP or any of the other, programs that keep us fed and healthy. According to the Congressional Budget Office, the big bullshit bill would increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion. Also, by 2034, across the country, nearly 11 million more people would be uninsured due to its historic cuts to Medicaid. And, this hits Kentucky particularly hard, Jesse. The Kentucky Center for Economic Policy said Kentucky would see the second largest cut to a state's Medicaid program of all states and the fifth largest coverage loss.
And the thing too is that, so many people in this state rely on Medicaid because this is a poor state.
Right.
And we are dealing with people in very poor rural counties where they were getting any kind of medical treatment before Obamacare existed. And the idea that Republicans are finding that it's easy to cut these expenses for taking care of people should be appalling to every person in Kentucky who votes, which raises the question is of why they keep voting for Republicans. But go on these other things.
So, as we've discussed, more than a third of all Kentuckians are on Medicaid for their health insurance. Most children, the highest number of children are on Medicaid, and in some rural counties, more than half of the people are on Medicaid. So this bullshit bill would translate to an estimated $1.7 billion cut to Kentucky's Medicaid program, terminating coverage for as many people as 345,000 people across Kentucky, and this is according to the Kentucky policy advocates. Governor Beshear says that the bill will lead to more Kentuckians without health care access, lack of funds for hospitals. You're going to see all kinds of clinics like family health centers and stuff shuttering because they're not going to have sufficient funds, and kids and seniors are going to go hungry. Those are some of the things. And it's interesting. Rand Paul is not a fan of the bill. It's not for humanitarian reasons, though.
Right. It's because of, I guess, deficits, and that's what he cares about. But it's also Tom Massey, was he Western Kentucky? I forget where he represents, but he was the only Republican in the House to vote against the bill. And the interesting thing about this bill is that I've seen various clips on YouTube and in other places where Republicans are being confronted by their constituents and saying, the bill has this in it, why did you support it? And the Republicans are saying, well, I didn't know that was in the bill. I just saw today that Marjorie Taylor Greene had this post, I think, on Twitter, where one of the provisions of the bill is that there's no state regulation of AI for 10 years. And she's like, very adamant that she says, if I had known this was in the bill, I wouldn't have voted for it, which begs the question, do they even read the stuff that goes in front of them before they vote on it? They obviously have staffers who are supposed to do this, and a lot of the things that are introduced in the bill are happening in the middle of the night when no one is aware of what's going on. Trump has told the Republicans, look, you have to support this or I'm going to come at you. Before this catfight between Trump and Musk was talking about the importance of cutting back these costs and all these other things. And one of the things about Musk is now he's against the bill. Do you want to know why?
Oh, I have a feeling I know why.
Okay.
Is
well,
it about money?
no,
It's about Musk's money?
it's about Musk's money because two provisions in the bill say that um, you are they're going to take away the tax credit for buying electric vehicles, and they're also taking away or trying to stop the building of these clean energy facilities which will build batteries. And Musk, Tesla relies on batteries. And the other thing about Tesla is that it it would not be as successful as it has been without these tax cuts for buyers of Teslas. And he knows, like, he's in trouble because he screwed up royally by even joining the Trump administration and killing jobs, taking away people's livelihoods, and ending these programs that were actually saving lives. But he doesn't care because it wasn't affecting him. And we find with all of these votes and with all these Republican activities that people will vote against their own interest until they find out, oh, it's going to hit me. And Musk has realized, oh, it's going to hit me. And I've lost money with Tesla ever since joining the administration because people realize what a scum. Yeah, I was going to say scumbag, but douchebag works just as well. But people are seeing that he's that kind of person. And if people have been reading our blog, they know that I've referred to Musk as a ketamine-addicted drug addict, a South African space Nazi, illegal alien. And maybe they read it as a joke, but it's all true. I mean, he is a drug user. I know that because when I was working in San Francisco, he was constantly in the news about these ketamine parties that he was throwing and how his associates were involved in ketamine. And, the idea that this whole space Nazi thing, he's talking about going to another planet, which I hope he goes to soon because we don't need him here anymore.
I'm just concerned that he's going to destroy our planet and then just, have all of his spawn, start a new race on Mars.
That's his intention, to destroy this planet. And, that's why he's doing these things in the government where he's ending jobs. He is responsible for the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. And people don't seem to understand that all the stuff he's cut have been essential services, and they are not only in the United States, they affect people worldwide. But he doesn't care because it's more money for him and for all the people who are part of his little coterie of what's the word? They're just evil people. It's like Elon Musk. Yeah, it's a cult, and he's a Bond villain. If you go to any James Bond movie and look at the evil guy in it, just put Elon Musk in that, and that's where we are. But anyway, you were saying.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that, thousands of Kentucky jobs are at stake regarding this clean energy part of what they want to cut. And this is according to the Columbus Dispatch. But in Kentucky, more than 11,000 jobs and billions of dollars in economic development hang in the balance as Congress considers axing clean energy tax credits approved in the Biden-era Inflation Reduction Act. One of the reasons that Kentucky gets so much of this is that we've been a coal state, right? And we're trying to stimulate economic development around clean energy.
And
right?
the Republicans have been making these unjustified promises that we're going to bring back coal. And that's not going to happen. The coal miners may think that that's what's going to happen, but you can get coal cheaper from places like India or from other countries. And there's not honestly, in other countries, they don't care about the health of people like here. I get the feeling that there's more of a slave labor attitude. Like, the reason that a lot of companies have outsourced their business to other countries is because it's cheap labor. So, it's...
Plus, you mentioned that around the coal thing. So you come back to coal, and then you have more miners mining coal, and you have more deaths because we're not going to have proper health care. Right,
because we're cutting Medicare and Medicaid, which most of them are relying on. And again, it goes back to this idea of, remember when everybody was criticizing Obamacare? Not because it was a bad program, because it was actually a Republican program, but Essentially, it was because it was a black guy who introduced it, and I have to say, there's like this element of racism throughout that whole anti-Obama era and the anti-Obamacare era, where they were telling lies that, if this legislation passes, your grandmother's going to die. Well, now Trump is passing all this legislation and people are actually dying.
Yeah.
But where are the complaints? Where are the outraged editorials about this?
Right.
I just don't know.
Yeah, and in terms of jobs around this clean energy stuff in Kentucky, we have more operational jobs at stake in these clean energy investments than almost any other state. That just blew my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And we're tied for the largest of any state east of the Mississippi River in terms of these investments. So this is real economic development. It's jobs. It's good for our air. It's good for our water. It's good for the planet. It's good for everybody. And we're going to lose out.
Right, and it's all being cut because we keep electing Republicans to these positions in the federal government. And I don't know if I've raised this before, but the fact that all these bills are passing and the Republicans aren't even looking at them, it just amazes me. I've been watching a bunch of clips, either on YouTube or on the news, where constituents are yelling at their Republican candidates or Republican representatives who are actually holding these town hall meetings, and they're saying things like, in this big batch of bullshit bill, there are these provisions that say that we're going to do this and this, and why do you support something like that? And the congressman will say, well, I didn't know it was in the bill. I read this thing today where Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's like one of the evilest people in the planet, she wrote on Twitter that there's this thing in the bill that says that states cannot regulate AI companies for 10 years. And she puts in big capital letters, if I had known this was in the bill, I wouldn't have voted for it. And, okay, so if she wouldn't have voted for it, if other Republican Congress people would not have voted for it, this bill wouldn't be in this discussion. We wouldn't be talking about it now. Instead, we're talking about how much it's going to hurt people, which they knew it was going to do, which the Trump administration knew it was going to do. We haven't even gotten into the point about, because of this bill, more tax cuts are going to billionaires, and that means less money is going to people who actually need the money. What's a billionaire going to do with his tax cut? Buy another yacht. What are people going to do with their tax cut? Well,
have food, maybe shelter.
Well, not only
maybe transportation,
right,
healthcare.
Right. This is just this list of
Basics.
Things where things are better for society in general, but the bill has made it so things are better for people who are already rich, who already don't know what to do with the money they've got, and who are just squandering these fortunes. It's repulsive.
And I just want to mention one other thing that really hits home for all of us is that FEMA, if we, lower what we're investing in FEMA, just think about, we're in Tornado Alley now,
Mm-hmm.
and we see that it's moved, eastward, and we're like Kansas now in Kentucky, historically. And, Rand Paul, of course, he thinks debt is the real problem, because with this bullshit bill, we're going to have an interest payment of $1 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to push out expenses like FEMA, which most people agree needs to be there during times of disaster.
Mm-hmm. Did you see in the news this week that the head of FEMA didn't know that there was a hurricane season? This is just, I'm amazed that all these people that Trump has bought into his little coterie of misfits don't know what their jobs are. They have no idea what they're dealing with. So, Miami is right on the path of every hurricane. South Florida is going to get wiped out, or, the Gulf Coast is going to be hit. And we've seen already that when these disasters happen, FEMA isn't there anymore. When Joe Biden was president, you saw Joe Biden go to these places the second the disaster happened, and Kamala Harris was right behind him. Trump hasn't been to any of these disasters. FEMA's not going to any of these disasters. So, again, why do people keep voting for these guys? I just don't get it.
Yeah, and I just want to go a little bit back to the healthcare part, the
Mhm.
disastrous healthcare part. You know, nearly half of Kentucky women rely on Medicaid to cover the cost of childbirth, right? So in 2023, 44% of all childbirths in Kentucky were paid for by Medicaid, higher than the national average. So again, low income women,
Mhm.
children,
Mhm.
you know, this is who's going to be affected by this disastrous bullshit bill.
Mhm.
And what I want to say before we get off this topic is it is time, if you haven't called or emailed our senators. McConnell's information is very easy to find, as is Rand Paul's. I actually did get a form letter back from McConnell about continuing to fund public broadcasting, because I'm a Louisville public media member and have been for a long time. Love KET. That would be a horrible thing for our country to lose out on that funding. But so I did get a response from him, and I have gotten responses from Rand Paul's office also.
Mhm.
But that's what we need to do, Kentuckians. We need to make sure that McConnell and Paul do not vote for this disastrous legislation.
Mhm. I get the feeling Rand Paul will not vote for it because he is a contrarian, and I will always say bad things about Rand Paul, but he's doing the right thing, not for the right reasons, but he's doing the right thing. He is saying that this bill is irresponsible, and it is. So, what also gets me is that there are, I keep raising this issue, but there are Republicans who keep doing these things. And what shocked me this week was that there's a state senator in Eastern Kentucky, I think. Robin Webb, yeah.
Mhm.
And this week she announced that she's leaving the Democratic Party to go to the Republican Party because the Republican Party better represents the values of Eastern Kentucky. So, what are the values of Eastern
Right.
Kentucky?
Do we need health care in
Do we
Eastern
need
Kentucky?
food?
Food?
Yeah. Do we? I don't know. Do we want clean air? Do we want?
Do we have children that we
Right.
want fed?
Right.
You know,
Or educated?
educated?
Do we want to deal with the
Vaccinated.
disasters that are coming? Like as you said, the tornadoes are now more prevalent in Kentucky than they've been in recent years. And she's decided to, I guess she's decided to be the latest clown in this Republican circus. And, the circus just keeps going on and on. And I don't know if this is a good time to make this transition, but the circus is even more prominent now that Musk and Trump are fighting. I don't know if you've seen what's going on there, but, Musk is saying things like Trump is in the Jeffrey Epstein files, which, oh, well, like we didn't know that. We've seen pictures of him with Jeffrey Epstein.
Plus, he is a convicted felon
Mhm.
over 34 times and rapist and
Yeah,
just horrible.
just what he
human being.
does. And, Musk isn't any better, but it's good to see like this little catfight between the two billionaires, just because there are things that I wonder about this situation. If Trump is intending to be a real dictator, is he going to be like Vladimir Putin was? Because a billionaire pissed off Vladimir Putin years ago, and he took away his fortune. He just took it away, put the guy in jail in Siberia. And you probably haven't, the guy's name was Mikhail Khodorkovsky. But that's what dictators do. So we have to see what Trump is going to do involving Elon Musk, because Steve Bannon is now pointing out that Steve Bannon has been pointing out that Musk came into the country illegally, and I've been looking at a lot of clips of people who've come to the country legally and are being not exported, just extradited out. They're sending people to places that
Deported.
Yeah, they're deporting people to places that they don't even know about. I've seen that they've been sending people from Haiti and South America to Africa.
Right. Sudan.
You're right, South Sudan, which is just a country that's in really horrible straits.
Right. And we've banned now, 19 countries, people from 19 countries from coming in. I think that happened this week too.
Right, and 500,000 people from Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, and Colombia were banned by Trump, which, it now takes me into the Cuban support of Trump. Like Cubans have always been supporting Republicans. We know that. But I've seen these clips. They're constantly running about where this Cuban band is playing this song called I Will Vote for Donald Trump. And then 5 seconds later, you have a bunch of Cubans saying, "Oh no, they're going to throw me out of the country, and I've been here, and I came in legally. I did all the right things." Well, in a sense, the people who came in illegally and didn't do the right things have a better chance of staying in the country because the government has the addresses of the people who did the right thing. And it's easier to track them down than to actually look for the alleged criminals and rapists and murderers.
Well, they used a legal process called
Right.
asylum.
Right, right. And now they are being carted away because their communities voted for Donald Trump. And I I I don't understand. Well, no, it's not like people had not been warned. Everybody was saying this is going to happen, and that was like written off as, "Oh, you liberals, you just like hate Trump. You have this Trump derangement syndrome." And he's going to bring down the cost of groceries, which have increased
Yes.
during his tenure.
Right.
He's going to do all these wonderful things, and none of these wonderful things are happening.
No, and this terrible bill will raise inflation.
Right. It has raised inflation. So we have tariffs that are part of his administration. Tariffs are increasing the cost of products that people buy. Places like Walmart and Amazon. Well, Amazon at one time was placing on its website what the tariffs are costing for each thing you buy, until Trump yelled at Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos, like a coward, ran away and had him take them off. So it's just not. We are not in a good situation, and I guess that will lead us to this idea of Trump wanted to be a dictator. Trump wants to be a king. And on June 14th, on
Yeah.
Flag Day, they're going to have this.
A nationwide day of defiance all over the country. And in Kentucky, we have a lot of opportunities to show Donald Trump that there are no thrones, no crowns, no kings on June 14th. And I just want to go through a list of the cities that I have information for, and just be sure you can Google 50501 Kentucky, 50501 Kentucky. They've got a great Facebook page.
What's the significance of that number?
It's 50 states, 50 protests, one movement. And this has been really effective, although of course we've discussed that the mainstream media really is underreporting these protests. Paducah on June 14th, 1 p.m. Hopkinsville, noon. Todd County, 11 a.m. Madisonville, 11 a.m. Owensboro, 11 a.m. Elizabethtown, 3:30 p.m. Franklin, 11 a.m. Bowling Green, 11:30 a.m. Louisville, noon. Danville, 10 a.m. Lexington, noon. Moorhead, noon. Hazard, noon. And for those folks near the border, Northwest Tennessee, noon, and Cincinnati, 11 a.m. One of the things I'm really heartened by, Jesse, is you don't see a hotbed of like progressive activity typically, right? In, I don't know, Madisonville or Hopkinsville or E-Town, and people are showing up because they're getting wise to the fact that this administration is destroying our democracy and destroying our lives.
Right, and we should also point out that the reason these protests are happening is because Trump has decided for his birthday, which happens to fall on Flag Day, that he's going to have this huge military parade down the streets of Washington where they get to show off the troops and the weaponry, kind of like being in North Korea.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's just he admires dictators. He likes the idea of showing power because he's an ineffectual person, and he's putting us through this sort of decimation of democracy. And as you noted on this, I actually have a big poster that says "No Kings," and we're going to put that out in front of our house on the 14th. But so many things are happening, and like it it really is difficult to watch this happen and not be appalled by what's going on. But again, there are so many people who are still like in their little bubbles and don't realize all the bad things that are going to happen to them. I don't understand why that's happening.
So I've got a segue to pitch to you, and that is about the national pastime,
Oh,
one of the greatest sports in the country, and lifting up Louisville, particularly University of Louisville.
well, today there's for people who know college sports, we're now in the season of baseball, and it's time for the baseball playoffs. There will be a College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska, in a week or two. But right now, we're in the Super Regionals, and amazingly, Louisville is in the Super Regionals starting today. There's a game at 3 o'clock at Jim Patterson Stadium. It's right next to the football stadium, and they're going to play Miami. The weird thing about this is that Louisville shouldn't be playing a home game in this whole series because they weren't even one of the ranked teams. There were like, I think, 16 ranked teams. Louisville happened to beat the number one team in the earlier rounds. Other teams beat the other ranked teams. And the result is that Louisville is now hosting the best of three series. It's going to happen today, tomorrow, and Sunday. First game's at 3 o'clock.
Are you going?
I'm going to walk by the stadium to see if there are any tickets. And I've written about this before on the blog, but during the season, Louisville baseball had free games. It's like you could just walk into the stadium. I remember walking by one day, and I saw that there was a game going on, and so I went up and I asked, "How much are tickets?" And they said, "Oh, it's free." And so I went in and I enjoyed the game. I think they were playing Wake Forest or someone like that. No, and then there are very few games that cost anything in terms of Louisville baseball. And I'm going to have to do an examination of this because it makes me question the role of the University of Louisville in general. And I've raised this before that it's, when you talk about going to college, people are looking for the college with the best, science program, or the best medical programs, or the best social studies programs. Harvard for just law, or Stanford and MIT for science. And Louisville doesn't really rank in those areas, but in terms of sports, Louisville is one of the best college sports schools in the country. The men's and women's basketball teams, they've both been in the NCAA tournament. They've both gone far in the NCAA tournament. The men's have won national championships. The women's have been in Final Fours. The volleyball team last year was in the finals. They lost to Pittsburgh, but again, that puts them at the number 2 team in the country. The swim team, it's got Olympic athletes on it. And now you have the baseball team going into possibly going to the College World Series. So I just wonder why Louisville doesn't take this approach and point out that, look, we're one of the best schools to go to if you're a student athlete. They can arrange their curriculum to do things like not only have them playing sports, but coaching. Louisville has good coaches, so why not teach these athletes the advantages of being coaches, or the strategies of being coaches? Their business team or their business side could do things related to how do you operate a sports franchise. Their legal people can do things in terms of contracts, laws, contracts for athletes. So there just seems to be so much of an opportunity to rebrand the school as one of the better student athlete schools in the country. And I would think that that'd be a draw for people to come to Louisville, especially if they realize the weight sports puts on the school. And you can tell that the school is more focused on sports because you just go to the campus and you look at all the stuff they built for all the student athletes. There are fields for every sport. The soccer team has its own stadium. The football team has a huge stadium. The baseball team has a stadium. The volleyball team and basketball teams play at the Yum Center, and they built a facility for basketball across the street from a new dorm that they built for student athletes. So if you look at the new buildings that have gone up on the Louisville campus, most of them have been in sports, and now they're putting up a new building for engineering. And the reason they're doing that is because the money from sports is bringing all this revenue, and they're able to like build new things for other students. So that's just my little talk for the advantages of being a sports school and not pretending to be anything else.
Yeah, fair enough. Thanks for lifting that up. Anything else about sports that you want to bring up?
Yeah, I'm going to the game this afternoon.
Yay.
I hope so.
I hope you get a ticket.
I did see, I checked on, what do you call it, on the Ticketmaster, and they were selling tickets for $31. So we'll see if that's still the case.
Right.
And that's like not free, but it's not expensive if you're thinking, well, this is like a major sports event, and it's nothing like what you would pay to go for a basketball game or a basketball tournament. I have gone to, I went to the tournament the year the men won the national championship for basketball. That was, I think, 2013. That was in Atlanta. The tickets were astronomical. I went to the women's tournament in Columbus, Ohio, when they made the Final Four, and the tickets were really expensive. I didn't even bother to look at volleyball tickets because they're just so expensive. But I had gone to the volleyball tournament several years ago when they made it into the Final Four, and that was reasonable, but it was like going to a professional game, spending like if you're going to a Cincinnati game for baseball or an Indianapolis game for football. But in general, the prices are very reasonable, except for men's basketball, because basketball is like God here in Kentucky. And it's stuff that you can take your kids to. And since we've been talking about the expense of things, you know, if a sport is free, you can take your kids to this. The baseball stadium has a nice field. There's a playground for kids. They bring in like this bouncy thing, like this bouncy castle that the kids can use. So, you know, that's free. I've sat and watched softball games, the women's softball games, and you just sit outside the stadium or go in the stadium because it's free and just watch some good athletes playing. The field hockey team, I've watched them play. There's a lacrosse team. I haven't been to the soccer stadium yet, so maybe next year. But it's going to those games are cheaper than going to like the professional soccer games here, or going to the minor league baseball games here. They're just more expensive. And if you're on a budget, take advantage of using college sports because they are reasonable. Even the football games, you know, if you're going to like a professional football game, you're going to spend hundreds of dollars. If you go to a Louisville football game, you can get into the stadium for maybe $20 to $30. And Louisville football this year, oh great, the football team's really good, and they have a good chance of making like the playoffs for college football. So there are so many opportunities here, and that's why I'm saying that if you're an administrator, if you're the president of the University of Louisville, just think about rebranding yourself. Because
being honest.
Yeah, sports is really important here. I'm sure sports are important at the University of Kentucky as well, but Louisville has a really good sports situation, and the city is bigger, so there are more people who can avail themselves of the inexpensiveness of these various things. So that's my little lecture on sports for now, and I'll probably like put something together in a blog post, just fleshing this out even more.
Yeah, maybe give us some dates of some upcoming things that are happening that we can go to.
Well, today.
Today at 3.
And tomorrow at noon. And if it's if each win a game, then the final game is Sunday in the afternoon. So
And we haven't said what date it is.
what date it is?
Today.
Oh, today, right? Yeah. This weekend is it for the Super Regionals.
Today is June 6th, by the way.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
So I'm going to segue. I promoted Voces Nove's choral concerts called A Stop at the Underground Railroad, and we sang to 2 sold out audiences in the old Town Clock Church, which is now Second Baptist Church, at 300 East Main Street in New Albany. We had these concerts last weekend, and Jesse, you and your wife got to come. It was really uplifting for a lot of reasons. First of all, just having a full church, that's amazing. And we sang so beautifully. I mean, so beautifully. And these were, primarily spirituals, right? And then we learned about the history of this church on the Underground Railroad and its significance. Underneath us were tunnels and places where enslaved people fleeing slavery were fed and housed and clothed, and provided provisions for going further up north. So it seemed like a real act of resistance to me, actually, Jesse, to celebrate our history while it's being whitewashed, while, slavery in the history books, who knows if they want to even just take that out because it's so DEI. But it was really a beautiful weekend.
Well, a couple of things I would point out in this, and I think there is this idea that they can reinstitute slavery here. It's unfortunate, but if you remember back at the campaign, Trump was talking about how he's going to get all the immigrants out of the country because they were taking away black jobs. And, a lot of people were saying, oh, what's a black job? But
yeah, Obama said, what's a black
yeah,
job?
and I know what it is, and I know in Trump's mind what he thought it was, and it's that, oh, the immigrants are going to go, and you're going to have black people out in the fields, like
picking tomatoes,
as he would say, like they were supposed to be doing, or picking grapes in 110-degree heat, and getting paid like less than minimum wage to work for more than 40 hours a week and work every day of the week.
Right. You're a black person who had like pretty major jobs.
Yeah, but I know that in his mind, I should be out in the fields picking cotton, and the reality is my family was out in the fields picking cotton back in the pre-Civil War days, and probably after that as sharecroppers. So this approach to the Underground Railroad really meant a lot to me as a black person, because I know in my family history that the Underground Railroad was crucial to freedom for some of my ancestors on my father's side. I've told this story before, where my third great grandmother was supposed to be released from slavery because her quote unquote owner was actually the person who had children with her. And when he died, he freed his slaves, but he was essentially freeing his family. And she knew that the guy's family was going to contest the will, so she ran away. And she went with 6 children. One of her sons was 16 years old. The slave catchers caught up to them, and she went back with 5 of the children and told the older son to use the Underground Railroad to get out of there and keep running. Excuse me. And he used the Underground Railroad to get from Virginia to Pennsylvania, used that to get from Pennsylvania to Ohio, and used that to get from Ohio to Canada. So the Underground Railroad really means a lot to my family's history. And Louisville was not only a point in which people were enslaved, but they were leaving from Louisville to go across the river to Indiana, which is why what this church's function was.
Right, and thousands of people went through this church in New Albany. It kind of gave me chills, Jesse. I was driving over the bridge, the I-64 West Bridge from Louisville over into Indiana, and you can see the church, like it's up on a bluff there by the river, and you see the white steeple, and it just made such an impact on me that people could see that steeple and knew where to go to cross the river.
Mhm. And in the winter, if I remember correctly, people were actually walking across
They
the
were.
ice from Kentucky to Indiana.
I also paid attention to the fact that the river's narrower right there,
Mhm.
so it just, it really had a lot going for it in terms of being able to cross the mighty Ohio.
Right, and if you're aware of just the geography of this region, there's also there's an underground railroad museum next to the church, which
Yeah.
I saw.
At the Carnegie Museum,
Right.
there's a really good exhibit there.
And there's, if you go east of here to Cincinnati, there's a huge underground railroad museum there next
Yeah.
to the sports facilities.
Right.
So
Took my kids there on field trips. Excellent.
yeah, so there's a deep history on just the slavery days and the protest against slavery. There were a lot of abolitionists in this region. One of the stories that I learned from the concert was that there was a conductor on a real train who wouldn't let people go on the train to arrest suspected escaped slaves,
Right.
which, that's just the bravery it took to do things like that, just to defy the authorities, which sort of should be an inspiration to us today, because we are in an authoritarian situation. And in history, the United States has always been an authoritarian government for a certain group of people, for black people. Like, the ideas. Indigenous people were murdered. Black people were enslaved. And when the slavery was over, they introduced these new laws to make sure that black people would remain in a state of servitude, which is also what concerns me today, because I think about this old concept of Trump saying black jobs and knowing what he meant. But if you think about it, there's also there are a lot of owners of for-profit prisons, and they get a lot of money from the federal government. So there is an incentive to put more people in jail, to just take away the rights of people for just souped up charges, which people say, oh, that doesn't happen, but it does, and everyone knows it does.
And it happens disproportionately to black men.
Right. So you put more people in these for-profit jails. What are they going to do with the people who are in the jails? They're going to put them out in the fields. It's like Cool Hand Luke, just being on a chain gang, doing all this menial labor that people don't want to do, and paying nothing for it. This is institutional slavery being reintroduced. So thinking about the stories of the Underground Railroad and realizing that the approach to democracy is very fragile these days, and that's why we're talking about the No Kings observations that are going to take place on Flag Day, a day that's supposed to be representative of American history because it's the celebration of the flag. But instead it's become this, Trump is trying to make it a celebration of himself.
Yeah.
And this is a person who wants to be a dictator, who just has a fragile ego, who's a bad person all around. And the fact that he and Elon Musk are fighting is just, it's a pleasure to watch. And we don't know how it's all going to end up, but the idea that these billionaires are fighting it out because one wants to be the king of the world. And Trump wants to be king of the world. That's why he's saying things like, let's make Canada a 51st state. And I'm sure the Canadians hate that idea. I've seen recently that Florida is thinking about seceding from the Union because you got Ron DeSantis, who's like a little pocket dictator. It's just ridiculous. And I keep thinking, why doesn't Canada just respond by saying, Trump is an idiot, and if there are states that want to join Canada, we'll do that. We'll take that instead. So I guess this is a sad way of saying that we're in a very fragile situation these days in this country. And if people, again, keep re-electing the people who are putting us in these troubles, we're doomed. We are just have a bad feeling about this, as they said in the Star Wars movies.
I think it would be really powerful if on July 4th, if on Independence Day, we had die-ins all over the country and people dress in black and put a sign on them like, children starve due to lack of, health care, or,
Women.
I died of a botched abortion,
Right,
etc. Or I'm brain dead and they're keeping me alive because I'm pregnant. That's
or
happening.
they took away my Medicare, or they took away my Medicaid, and they complained about Obama allegedly killing grandma
Right.
during the Obamacare days, which was a lie the whole time. But these people are really literally killing grandma now.
Right.
And the outrage isn't there,
No.
which brings me to one, I guess, last point, and that's just the media coverage of this has been horrendous.
Yeah.
I keep reading these things where it's not about the policy; it's about the sport of it. We're on this side, they're on that side. They won this round. It's like, why don't you just
Like ping pong.
yeah, just do a bracket. It's like, oh, here's a sports bracket. Here's the atrocity. Here's what the Democrats are doing. Let's see who's winning this round. And it makes me reflect on something that I heard that I think it was the head of NPR said several months ago during the course of the demonstrations. NPR didn't cover them, or was it? Yeah, it was NPR didn't cover them. And the woman who ran NPR said that she went out to see the demonstrations and she didn't see anything in it that made it worth covering, even though there were thousands of people there.
Mm-hmm.
And what she was really saying was, and I've seen this in other places, there were no black people there, there were no police there. That means that heads weren't going to be cracked. And this is the truth. If you have an all-white demonstration, the police presence is going to be completely different than if there is an all-black demonstration.
And I'm not going to make as much money because it's not clickbait.
Yeah, but it's also, the idea that black people are there to be sacrificed.
Mm-hmm.
That's a bad liberal thought, that I'm not going to this demonstration because there are no black people. They just want to see black people get their heads cracked. And this is what's happened during the Breonna Taylor and the George Floyd protest, when black people were out in the streets, and police were there with military vehicles, with tanks, and with heavy artillery. But when white people protest, you don't see that at all.
No.
And the thing that was most egregious during the time was that when black people were protesting peacefully, there were young white people who were breaking windows. And they thought that that was okay. And black people had to tell them to stop doing it because we know what's going to happen in these demonstrations. They're not going to go after the white people. They're going after the black people. And that's what they did in Louisville. That's what they did in the George Floyd protest in Minneapolis. That's what they did in St. Louis when the protests were happening there. So just this coverage has been just atrocious. And there are certain political commentators who are now wringing their hands saying how horrible this all is, when they were actually taking this middle of the road approach to the whole Trump candidacy and Trump presidency. And it's like their messages are essentially, well, I didn't vote for this. Well, we didn't vote for it either, but you guys probably voted for Trump. And thinking that he was going to do all these things that he lied about, that he was going to reduce prices. He was going to end the war in Ukraine
In one day.
in one day. And what I think today I saw a headline saying, he said, well, maybe we should just let them fight it out.
Right.
It is really
It's a little game.
frustrating. And having been in journalism, and I did my part to try to get these messages out. I would say things like, let's look at Elon Musk, for example. When we were covering him in San Francisco, I would say things like, when you write about him, you should say that he's an illegal immigrant, he's a drug user, and he doesn't, he's not a good person. and he's from South Africa. He was raised in South Africa during apartheid, which means that's what his thoughts are about black people. So I would not be surprised if he was the one who went to Trump and said, the white farmers in South Africa are being slaughtered by black people, which was a total lie. And if it wasn't Elon Musk, it was probably Peter Thiel, who's another South African billionaire, who's still in the government. He took over Doge after Musk left.
And he owns PayPal, so he's got a lot of information that he's gathering on all of us.
And Elon Musk gathered a lot of information on us when he sent his little incel minions into various agencies and got access to people's personal records. So, we just have to be very careful now, and we have to look at history. That's the other flaw that I see in this country. People don't reflect on what history has already shown us. And there's nothing happening now that didn't happen before. So, if you go back into the 50s and you look at the civil rights protest from the 40s onward, if you look at history in terms of just Reconstruction and how once black people were liberated, the new laws came in that made sure their liberation wasn't going to last. These are things that people have to be aware of. But again, the Republicans are cutting funds to education. The Republicans are cutting funds for DEI programs. And DEI wasn't being taught in the schools to begin with. That was a lie. It's just a consistent batch of lies that they were telling their
base.
I have to say gullible base. So, okay, I think I better get off my soapbox now because I'm going a little overboard with this. But anyway, so what else do we have?
I think that's it for me.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank everybody who's been listening to us. One note, just if you haven't gone to our website, go to it now because we had a really good day on the site this week. On Monday, we had 200 views, which for us is a lot. So I'd like to thank the people who did that. I hope that more people will come. It's the bluegrassbluespodcast.com. It's free. We don't intend to start charging for it, unlike certain Substacks.
What platforms is it on now?
It's on YouTube. The podcast is on YouTube. It's on Apple Music and on Spotify. There are videos, or we have various entries on the podcast site itself. So there are plenty of opportunities to take a look at it, be a subscriber. Again, we're not asking for money, just we like to share our messages and hope you would share it too. So with that, I think we're out.
Goodbye.
Goodbye, folks.
Our closing music is by John Chamberlain.